Our first dissection, we dissected the earthworm.
Now, you can pause if you want to see everything specifically, but the differentiation between each level in the kingdom is that the animals are multicellular and acquire nutrients via ingestion, and for the phylum, it is segmented and symmetrical body structures.
That's the farthest down that separated from the other organisms.
For the worm habitats, worms are everywhere in the world, but here are some specific ones. Leeches and bloodworms are in ponds and rivers. Ribbon and flatworms can live in the ocean. Parasitic worms live in host organisms and the soil.
It may be doubted whether there are many other animals which have played so important a part in the history of the world as have these lowly organized creatures. This is Charles Darwin referring to earthworms.
Worms decompose organic material, they pass through soil, and they're eaten by lizards, salamanders, toads, and any ground-crawling insects, centipedes, and flatworms.
So for the worm dissection, um, here, where my mouse is pointing to right here, the first picture, that arrow is pointing to the septum. So septum are circular and they separate an earthworm's internal cavities. These septums, they're flexible enough to allow the worm to be able to contract. And this makes sure that the fluid cannot escape, and so the worm can't change its size. And in this picture right here to the left, you can see you can't see the hydrostatic skeleton, but since the worm doesn't have an exoskeleton, it has to have the hydrostatic skeleton instead, which allows it to change size. And during our dissection, our group was lucky because we were able to find part of the longitudinal muscle. Kind of see it here. And this longitudinal muscle allows the earthworm to be better adapted to any environment because it can increase or decrease its length. This is useful in the soil. And although we found the longitudinal muscle, we were not able to find the circular muscle. Even though the circular muscle allows the worm to be able to change its width, those are near impossible to find, and we didn't get lucky there. But the longitudinal and circular muscles together allow the worm to be best suited to any environment. And right here, we just pointed out the skin. The skin of a worm is flexible enough to allow the worm to change size. That's very useful with the circular and longitudinal muscles. And right here, the pharynx, it's muscular and it facilitates food digestion.
The crayfish.
The crayfish is part of all of these classification names, down kingdom through species. It is part of the kingdom Animalia, which means that an animal, in order to be an animal, it has to be multicellular and acquire nutrients via ingestion. It's also part of the phylum Arthropoda, which means it has structural symmetry, exoskeleton, jointed limbs, and a segmented body. Crayfish have strong abdominal muscles, which allow for fast swimming. They also have 10 legs, part of a segmented body. The calipeds are the large claws. The carapace, or the shell, is the crayfish's exoskeleton. The shell gives protection but limits growth. It protects the internal organs. The parapods are the walking legs. The segmented tail allows for flexibility. The bones contain calcium and can allow for muscles to contract and allows nerves to receive messages. Anterior gastric muscles and posterior gastric muscles provide the stomach with muscle action. Mandibular muscles deal with the opening and closing of the mandibles. Abdominal flexor muscles can move the tail and fold it under the body. The crayfish have joints which increases flexibility.
Crayfish adaptation. The eyes are on long moving stalks, which allow a larger field of view to see predators or prey. The antennae to feel prey and detect predators. The crayfish's exoskeleton is the same color as its environment. Gills are located under the carapace, which is part of the exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is made of calcium. The crayfish burrow for much of the reproduction. Pincers are used to protect themselves. They can regrow limbs that are lost in a fight. And the mouth parts are similar to scissors to cut food. The carapace is used as protection. Some behavior adaptations include that the crawfish hide under rocks during the day and they come out at night when there are no predators. They are able to have some terrestrial activity to avoid isolated and drying up pools of water. Crawfish can use flips of their tails to escape danger. They hide for 2 days after molting to protect its soft body. And they carry eggs under tail for protection.
This is our crayfish dissection. So in the first picture is just like the overview picture of before we dissected. So in the middle picture is still before we dissected, but this is a picture of the tail, which allows it for fast swimming. And then the third picture, the one all the way to the right, is a picture of the carapace, which is like the hard exoskeleton that protects its muscles. The picture on the left are the calipeds, which are like the claws. The abdominal flexor muscles are right here, which help it move the tail to help it swim fast. Here are the mandibles, which basically helps it eat. On the left are the mandibular muscles, which help control the mandibles. And on the right are the teeth in its stomach, which after it eats the food, it breaks it down in its stomach with its teeth.
They dig burrows in the mud or under rocks or even lily pads. They can live anywhere there's water, like streams, rivers, ponds, lakes, marshes, swamps, and wetlands.
Okay, so we're now going to talk about the clam. Okay, so the kingdom, or the binomial nomenclature of the clam, the hard clam, is the Mercenaria. The kingdom is Animalia, and animals are multicellular and acquire nutrients via ingestion. The phylum is Mollusca, which is classified by soft bodies covered by a hard exoskeleton. The class is Bivalvia, classified by, most contain 2 half shells, some burrow into sediment, and others live on the ocean floor.
So now you can pause if you want to keep reading, but we're going to move on. So clam has a few adaptations. One is that clams can eat toxic algae. This means that they can eat this toxic algae that's not toxic to them because of their adaptation, making them vital to the environment and preventing algae outbreaks. Inhalant siphones are used for respiration and filter feeding. And another one is male releases sperm drawn in by female bivalve. And another one is shut down non-essential processes when out of water, allowing them to survive for years. This means they can just stay out of water whenever they want due to this adaptation. And another one is an object.
Staff and students, we pardon the interruption. Will the following 3 students please come down to the office and receive your prize for having your buckle up magnets on your car today? Nick Hines, Natalie Blackburn, and Casey Henry. Please come down and see me now. Thanks.
It's fine.
So then another one is that when an object gets stuck in a clam's body and shell, it can be absorbed by the mantle or even the outer membrane. Over time, layers and layers of it will go over the object, and eventually it could produce a pearl. And a final one is they can permanently attach themselves to the substrate through byssal threads.
So animals that prey on clams include catfish, carp, sunfish, birds, crayfish, frogs, otters, raccoons, and muskrats. And clams feed on algae, plankton, and decomposed animal particles.
So clams also have a few habitats. One is a freshwater environment, and this is common in large rivers and streams. And it also will burrow into a soft substrate. So we did a dissection of the clam, and on the picture farthest to the left, as you can see, the umbo is part of the bivalve shell. That is the umbo. Another one is on the middle picture is the abductor muscles. These are used in the clam. And the next is the foot. The foot is used for many different things in the clam, including moving as well as digging. And the abductor muscles can help keep the clams alive for short periods outside of the water, and they open and close the shell. Alright, that's the clam. Eyes. Now we're going to talk about the frog. The frog's kingdom that it's in is Animalia. The reason that it makes it an Animalia is because animals are multicellular and acquire nutrients and ingestion. So this classifies the frog as an Animalia. The phylum that the frog is in is Chordata. This contains a notochord at some point during development, tail nerve cord, above gut, gill slits opening from pharynx to exterior, and an endostyle between gill slits. This makes it a chordata. Now pause if you'd like to go more in depth and look at the other levels. The habitats of the frog live in are deserts, rainforests, swamps, rivers, trees, everywhere but Antarctica. Here are some frog feeding relationships. Frogs consume flies, mosquitoes, fish, worms, snails, spiders, and other frogs.
So some animals that eat the frogs are snakes, lizards, birds, shrews, raccoons, and you can pause if you want to see more. So some frog general adaptations, they have webbed feet. This allows them to swim since they live a lot in aquatic. This can help them swim better and faster. They have eyes and nose on the top of their head. This helps like if they're diving into the water, they can see like what's below them. They have a long sticky tongue, which is useful for preying, like snatching up flies, and they can breathe through their skin, which is very useful if they spend time underwater. So our frog dissection. Here you can see abdominal muscles. Strong abdominal muscles are good for swimming. You can see the webbed feet, which helps swimming. So we went into more depth with the thigh. Like we really examined all of the thigh muscles. So right where the arrow is, it's kind of in between the two. It's in a little pit almost. Is the adductor longus. The adductor longus, it has an insertion point of the femur and is mainly used for protraction and adduction of the femur. So here you can see the inside muscle right here is the gracilis major. The gracilis major, or actually I'll start with the adductor magnus. The adductor magnus right here has an insertion point of the femur and is also used for protraction and adduction to the femur. So that one's very similar to the adductus longus. And another muscle we identified here is the gracilis major. The gracilis major has an insertion point of the knee aponeurosis, is used for retraction and adduction of the femur. This just makes sure that the bones does what the muscles want to. And here, the fourth muscle we identified was the sartorius. It has an insertion point of the tibia and is used for protraction and adduction of the femur. And the fifth and final one was the triceps femoris. This muscle has an insertion point of the knee aponeurosis and is used for knee extension. And so humans have 4 of these 5 thigh muscles in common with frogs. Humans have the gracilis major, adductor magnus, adductor longus, and sartorius. This is pretty fascinating to me and our whole group because human legs are used primarily for walking and running, and frog legs are used mainly for jumping. And despite the differences in primary transportation, 4 of the 5 muscles are still the same. And so in this picture here, this is just like a more zoomed out picture of the thigh, and where the arrow's pointing, it's not pictured, but it's below is where the Achilles tendon is.
So this is the planaria. Binomial nomenclature is Gerardia tigrina. The kingdom is Animalia because it's multicellular and acquires nutrients by ingestion. And the phylum is Platyhelminthes, which is soft-bodied, flattened invertebrates, mostly parasitic, symmetrical body.
You can pause the video if you want to look at it more.
Planaria live in fresh water, typically found under rocks and debris in bodies of water, and in streams, springs, and ponds. Okay, so planaria prey on living organisms, dead organisms, and protists. And the predators of planaria are water bugs, crustaceans, tiny fish, and tadpoles.
Some general adaptations of planaria is that it can regenerate. Like if it gets cut in half, it can still live. The two sections should eventually grow into a full planaria. This is useful for their environment too because they live around a lot of sharp rocks, and if they get cut in half, they need to be able to live. They have a lot of cilia, and those help them move around their habitat. And they're triploblasts, which means that they have 3 layers of cells. And this is a great adaptation because it allows the planaria to change its size more easily. And one of the reasons why the triploblast is important is because the longitudinal muscle allows it to change its length. And this allows it to be better adapted because its size, it can either be short and fat or long and skinny. Planaria also have a hydrostatic skeleton, which is absolutely vital for their aquatic environment because it allows the size changing. And planarias also have a muscular pharynx, which is used for food digestion. And the parenchyma, it's connective tissue that provides support. And so the worm and the planaria and the hydra all have hydrostatic skeletons. These are some of the pictures that we took. You can pause if you want to look at them more.
Should we play the video on that?
Yeah. Change. So, so we also took a video of the planaria, like cutting it in half, so you can watch that here. So we're gonna be about ready to cut it with a cover slip. And then here you can see it's being cut, and the 2 organisms can still live. And that was fascinating to all of our group.
So first, you go up here. Okay, so this organism is the hydra.
The classification levels of the hydra are shown. The kingdom is Animalia. The characteristics of this kingdom are animals are multicellular and acquire nutrients via ingestion. The phylum of hydra is Cynardia. Cynaria are aquatic, have tentacles, have a single body opening, and have 2 layers. The hydra has curving tentacles. They are hollow and cylindrical. The mouth of the hydra is surrounded by the tentacles. The outer layer of the hydra has longitudinal muscle fibers. Circular muscle fibers line the gut cavity. When the mouth of the hydra is closed, the water will act as a hydrostatic skeleton, and this allows the hydra to be long and skinny or short and fat. 2 layers of cells separated by connective tissue called the mesoglia. Lower end is closed, other end opens and ejects food and waste.
The hydra feeding adaptations. So first off, it reduces its volume by using its muscles to squeeze out water from the gut cavity through the mouth. They use their longitudinal and circular muscles, as well as the water that creates a hydrostatic skeleton, to bend and change the thickness and the length of the body. Hydra uses water inside of it to create a hydrostatic skeleton. This water can be emptied out. They use their stinging tentacles to attack prey. They have a basal disc on their backsides they can use to attach and detach from their surroundings. They easily shrink and contract in order to hide. They normally use a somersault motion to move around. This is where they use their tentacles and basal disc to attach to different surroundings and flip themselves over. The hydra habitat are freshwater environments of many depths, an example of lakes and rivers. They often attach to vegetation, but never soft surfaces. The hydra feeding relationships, their prey are worms, insect larvae, small crustaceans, larval fish, and other invertebrates. Predators are other arthropods, leeches, flatworms, soft-shelled turtles, and salamanders. Oh, wait. And this is our picture that we got of the hydra from the microscope lab.
Hello, everyone. We are doing the stentor.
Okay, the stentor. Here is all of the classification levels of the stentor, down kingdom through species. Its kingdom is the Protista, and this kingdom contains the eukaryotic cells that are neither plants, animals, or fungi. The phylum it's in is Ciliophora, which means that it basically just uses cilia to move around in freshwater or saltwater.
The stentor is a trumpet-shaped protist. It changes to pear-shaped when swimming. There are multiple ciliary membranes that are spinning around in the part leading to the mouth. The regeneration in stentor is very useful as it can turn extremely small portions of organisms into full organisms. Feeding adaptations. Take food in cytosome, a particular region of the cell surface, or at any random point of interest. A collar is composed of fine pseudopodia surrounding the flagellum. Particles of food are trapped in the collar and ingested by the pseudopodia.
Centaur habitats, it is commonly found in freshwater environments, and they're usually free swimming, but they're sometimes attached to vegetation. Their feeding relationships are they are filter feeders, which means that they passively eat whatever gets swept in their direction, which commonly means that they eat algae and bacteria. A predator of centaur are fish larvae. So this right here is
Back it up.
this is the cilia in the centaur, which helps it. Yes. Okay, this is the stentor video compliments.
This is Nakata.
That's just it swimming around,
As you can see,
passively eating whatever comes its way.
the cilia on the end.
Yes, you can.
Let's hope the fish larvae we don't take that. Am I right?
Okay, and that is the stentor.
So this is the cladogram that we created to show all the organisms. As you can see, the first branch off is stentor. This branch is because it is a protist. The next, we have a skeletal system, which the rest of the organisms include. Then we have an exoskeleton branch with the bivalve shell and chelopads as two branches for both clam and crayfish. Next, we branch off into worm, planaria, and hydra. This branch is based off the hydrostatic skeleton. The worm has its own branch because of its coelomic fluid that it uses to structure itself. Next, we have planaria and hydra branch off because of their ability to regenerate. The planaria is different because of their pharynx muscles, and the hydra is different because of its tentacles. Next, we have the vertebrae. The only organisms that have a vertebrae is the frog, so the frog is the farthest away from the common ancestor.